Hello and welcome to Cricket and Wrestling for Us. Today, first off, I've got a very special guest who's on this side of me, who I'm going to introduce shortly. But before I do that, today is a day that I just want to talk about wrestling. How Mr. Nick on my left, who I will introduce, got into wrestling, right? What is good about wrestling? And first off, what is this beautiful sport or pro wrestling, whatever you want to call it? Is it sports
It's a
entertainment?
sport, absolutely.
Thank you very much. See, you're my man. That's the thing. A lot of people say it's fake. Doesn't it's a sport. It's a genuine sport. I'm very, very happy. I've got Nick, the Macho Man. I absolutely love it. I love the name. And if you don't know already, Nick has multiple YouTube channels to do with cricket, to do with films, reviews, TV shows, superhero stuff, comic books, and now I'm so glad he's also interested in wrestling. So first off, Nick, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'm going to change my name one more time. There's a story behind that name, but I'm super excited. Ozja and I were talking cricket after we recorded another video for his channel, and he started talking wrestling, and I could see in his eyes that he's like, oh, Nick likes wrestling? He's into wrestling? I've been into wrestling for a long time. We'll get to that later, but I could talk about it all the time. I still keep up with it here and there. Not so much currently with WWE, but we'll talk about that later as well. But yes, it's been a long time.
I am very happy to hear that, especially the part where it's been a long time, because I'll tell you a little story, Nick. I actually got into wrestling when I was about 4. I remember my brothers used to play a video game where you had Hulk Hogan, you had The Undertaker, you had the Macho Man, Randy Savage, you had Ric Flair. I can't remember what the game was, but The Undertaker, it was 2D graphics, and The Undertaker would choke people rather than hit the choke slam. And that's all I knew how to do when I was 4. And then I got introduced to yeah, exactly. There we go. You know exactly which game I'm talking about. Anyways, just thought I'd let you know about that story. Nick, tell me about the Domi. I'd love to know about the Domi.
All right. So I've never been considered cool. When I was in 11th grade, I think there was a few of my friends were into wrestling, and then another kid that was really into wrestling like myself. He was in 9th grade. And so we would go to his house a lot. His parents were never home. We'd play video games, and we would do front yard wrestling. And we would try to do stupid stuff, get injured a lot. But we'd also play the video games. And in the video games back then, I think it was WrestleMania, the black cartridge for 64, WrestleMania 2000, whatever it was, you can create your own character. And I thought this was so awesome. So I created this character. He had the face paint, and he was bald. He had the black pants. And I can't exactly remember where Domi came from. It might have stood for dumb homie. That's who I was. Always self-deprecating, just like boring reviews, right? But I started calling myself the Domi. I came out in Hulk Hogan's American Music or whatever. And that's just who I always was. So that's why I changed the name to that, because that was the character I created. We used, no joke, 11th grade, I would play with the action figures with this kid who was really into it in 9th grade. We'd have the music on the CD, do the entrance. We never did the wrestling match. It was always about the production.
Yeah.
That's how deep my nerd veins go, my friend.
I'll tell you one thing. You said you were never cool. You're cool right now, Nick. You're the coolest.
All right, finally.
You're the coolest.
My time has come.
Absolutely love it. Thank you once again for joining. I love the story. Honestly, I can't remember what I remember what my video game character was called. It was called AJ Man, and his secret move was the AJ Slam. I have no idea where AJ came from, but it was called the AJ.
Dude, that's
Slam.
awesome. The AJ Man can do the AJ Slam, baby.
Oh man! See, talk about wrestling. All the live long day. Right. Okay. To the present question, then, Nick. Let me ask you this: how did you get into this beautiful sport that we call professional wrestling?
So you had told me you were going to ask me this question. I was trying to think. I want this. There's one or two ways. One was my older brother. Always looked up to him. He's 19 months older than I am. Always thought he was the coolest. He liked watching wrestling on TV. And so I liked watching wrestling on TV. The other thing was I was in Little League when I was 9 years old. And the cool kid on the team, who I thought was a cool kid, invited me to his birthday party. Ended up being watching, it was WrestleMania. It was the one that was outside, I think, Caesar's Palace or something like that. It's the one where Hulk Hogan comes to help Bret Hart, who loses the title to Yokozuna.
Oh, I remember
Yokozuna
that.
issues a challenge to him, and Hulk Hogan goes in there and wins the belt. It was a really stupid title change. But I watched that live at this kid's house at his birthday party. For some reason, no one else showed up. And this guy was the cool kid. No one else showed up for me. So we had all the pizza, all the drinks we wanted. We watched WrestleMania live. For me, a kid whose parents were never going to order that stuff, that was super cool. And so that, to me, like the cool kids into it, my brother's into it, let me get into it. And after that, I really started paying attention. So that's kind of a combination of the two. But I also want to say it was ever since, like you said, since I was a kid as well, because I just grew up watching, learning. I used to watch the Saturday morning show with that one guy's name. He would do a recap like at 10 a.m. on USA or whatever, way back in the day.
Wow. That match you're talking about, the WrestleMania match, I know it's infamous for being, very political and people don't like it. I absolutely loved it when I saw it the first time.
Oh,
So
absolutely. As a
it
Hulk
was
Hogan
great
fan.
because my favorite wrestler was Bret Hart. There was this guy who just beat my favorite wrestler, and someone else just beat him afterwards. So I was like, I'm happy. But definitely, I think what you said about, having that experience of when you were younger, getting all that information processed through, especially in those recaps. The recaps we used to get in Pakistan were just WCW. So this was like mid 90s, just at this time where Goldberg was just
I
becoming
know
the
it very
thing,
well. Yeah.
right? 1997, and I remember that in Pakistan you didn't have any of the promos. All they showed was the entrance, the wrestling match, and post wrestling match, and then nothing else in the middle because censorship and all that stuff. So I only enjoyed the wrestling, and I was like, oh, this is great. Got into Goldberg, Sting,
Love
NWO,
Goldberg, yep.
all that good stuff. But yeah, definitely, I think getting those snippets early on makes you very invested. And personally, I enjoyed wrestling for a very long time. Then I stopped for about 11 years, and I got into it because, as the name, as I mentioned, Goldberg came back into the WWE, and people don't like calling him Goldberg anymore. As I think I've already told you, people call him Oldberg because he's now old. And
Disrespect.
anyways, that's a brilliant story. Thank you for sharing that, Nick. Now, if I were to ask you, as you mentioned, you talked about one of the earliest memories of yours, but what was one of the best wrestling memories that you've had? Especially, it doesn't matter if you're watching alone or with people, but what is the actual wrestling event that you're like, okay, that's the best memory I've got from a wrestling pay-per-view or a wrestling show?
Oh man, so I have seen most of the WWF pay-per-views using the WWE network the last several years. I've watched almost every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen quite a few of them. There's a few of them. First of all, you can't talk about great matches without Hell in the Cell, Undertaker, Mankind, where Mick Foley goes over it. Not because he goes over it like, oh, cool, that's a good stunt. Because the man said, throw me over. In that moment, he was so committed to it. He didn't know if he was dead or not. Gets back up, climbs up again, goes through it. Undertaker, you watch interviews about him. He says, this guy was crazy. I didn't want to do this stuff. Choke slams him through. I mean, watch that match. Gives you goosebumps. It was career defining for Mick Foley. I'm a huge Mick Foley fan. Next, the tournament, I think it was WrestleMania 4, if I'm not mistaken, or WrestleMania 5. The tournament where the Macho Man Randy Savage went through the whole bracket and he won the WWF title at that time, the heavyweight title. Macho Man was my favorite as a kid, will always be my favorite. Rest in peace, Randy Poffo. And he was my favorite because he was that underdog, in my opinion. He wasn't as big as Hulk Hogan. He wasn't this or that. He didn't even say that much. He had great promos later on, but early on, he didn't say that much. But he had the beautiful woman on his side. He had the awesome little actions or whatever, and he had the amazing elbow drop. I still, to this day, I probably shouldn't do it. As a teacher, I always threaten my kids. You do that again, you're getting an elbow drop from the top turnbuckle, right? I never do it, obviously, but it's just, I think it's hilarious. It's one of the greatest finishers of all time. More currently, I love Daniel Bryan's WrestleMania 30, where he goes to the gauntlet of Triple H, and then he takes out Batista and Randy Orton for that championship, and the Yes Movement is complete. That was fantastic. And I got to say, honestly, the one I've watched the most, it's a tandem. When Goldberg won the USA title from Raven, I hated Raven so much and his stupid flock, even though Saturn was pretty cool. And then when he took out Hulk Hogan, WCW missed out on a golden opportunity to really capitalize money-wise on making that in a pay-per-view. They said, forget that. We're going to do it at a live show in Atlanta. Goldberg taking, because no one beat Hulk Hogan. He was in his contract. He had complete control of what happened at every single match. He agreed to it, and they didn't waste any time. And to see him take it, and you got Bobby the Brain shouting, do it now. Fantastic moment. It's on YouTube. You can watch it as many times as you want. Those are just a few of my favorite matches.
One you mentioned there, we talked about the Yes Movement. That's quite recent, but the Goldberg Hulk Hogan match, again, that's one of my first matches that I've seen in my wrestling career, if you want to call it that. And I remember I was so happy because my brother supported Hulk Hogan. I supported Goldberg.
Oh, how could you? Oh, man. I see it now, but as a teenager, even as a teenager, I hated his guts during that period of time. I look back and I say it's a brilliant career move. Hated his guts.
Oh, man. Anyways, so let me talk to you just one more point about what's the big thing that's changed since, you know, we had the Monday Night Wars. You had WCW versus WWF, then WWE afterwards. WWE took over. WCW became the big dog, for no lack of another word, right? And then it became kind of like a machine. It wasn't providing as much creativity over the past, let's say, 15, 20 years.
It's garbage.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Those are nicer words than a lot of other people would use. So thank you for that, Nick. But what do you think? Why do you think that stagnation started up? What's the reason why there had to be the birth of AEW in the last few years?
I think there's three main reasons just from the top of my head. And if there was a 1A reason, you could say Vince McMahon. He's the guy that brought WWE to what it is in its heyday. He's completely responsible. He took almost like a on-the-road company from his dad, and he turned it into a thing on WrestleMania 3 where you had celebrities, you had politicians, you had everyone that had to be there at that match. He did all of that. Absolutely fantastic. Monetized merchandising. He was a genius with that kind of stuff, and he was a genius for many, many years. I think the last 10 years, he has not relinquished control, and I think that's one of the biggest issues. 1B with Vince McMahon, the biggest issue with him is he loves his star. He loves his guy, and it's almost like he wants his guy to be there for 10 or 20 years at a time. The first one was Hulk Hogan. That was a genius move. You put the entire company on Hulk Hogan's shoulders, and he brought it to what it was by the time he left in the early to mid-90s. But recently, he's been very, very rigid on going from Roman Reigns, right? John Cena, before Roman Reigns. He sticks to these guys, and these guys have to be wearing some kind of championship belt for the majority of that year, that it becomes very predictable. And with that, my second reason is the WWE is not listening to the fans. They're listening to what they think the fans want. They're not listening to what the fans want. No one can tell me that Daniel Bryan, whose real name is Bryan Danielson, which is so weird. No one can tell me that Daniel Bryan's rise, WrestleMania 30, in my opinion, would never have happened if the fans didn't demand it. I don't believe that Triple H, who was helping run the show, Vince McMahon, that they even had that on their radar. They were using him just a year earlier to lose his title to Sheamus from a bro kick in the first 3 seconds when he gets a kiss from AJ. That's how they were using Daniel Bryan, as a little stooge to the Big Show, for crying out loud. They didn't know what to do with that star. He came back from an injury. He started doing yes. And he was doing this when he was that annoying character first. People loved it. When he came back and he started doing this, he's like, oh, people are liking it. He grew the beard. He changed the attitude. He brought that character forward. And it still seemed like we were watching on Monday Night Raw week after week. It seemed like Vince McMahon and Triple H, who was running the show, they did not want to have him be the guy. They were still pushing Randy Orton, who I love Randy Orton. He's the Viper, the Apex Predator. They were still pushing Batista. Love Batista. But it was not their time. It was Daniel Bryan's time. And then they jumped on it and they act like it was their thing. That's the kind of problem they have. They want to control the narrative. They don't want the fans and the pops and the reactions they get to control it. And if you do that, I'm not saying don't have a script at all. But if you don't listen to the fans, What is the problem? I don't understand. That's a main issue. And then the last issue is the writing. It's a running joke that Vince McMahon will hire a writer. You're his favorite writer, but you have a shelf life of about 1 year. And then he hates you and you're out of there. Vince Russo was one of their main writers in the Attitude Era. You know what Vince Russo did in the WCW? He completely destroyed it. He was a horrible showrunner in the WCW. A big reason, there's a whole lot of reasons why the WCW went down in flames. And I'm a huge WCW guy. He doesn't hold on to writers. I think he makes emotional decisions. He severs ties. Braun Strowman, why is he not on the roster? Why in the world is Braun Strowman on there? I have no idea. Vince McMahon is the main issue right now. He was fantastic for so many years. He's fantastic on the mic, for crying out loud. But he needs to move on. I don't know if Triple H either has no power or he's making bad decisions as well, because the NXT product is fantastic, but they're not able to translate that into the WWE product. Roman Reigns is a huge problem. The fans don't care, and this is 10 years of them booing John Cena, WWE not caring about it. In a nutshell, those are the main reasons, I think.
Those are all valid reasons, and I'm glad you bring up, some of the points about the biggest point for me is the fact that the WWE isn't listening to the fans, and when they don't listen, there's going to be some sort of revolt. I think one of the few times I can recall that they tried to listen was the pipe bomb by CM Punk in 2011. But even though that was kind of scripted or not scripted, I don't fully know if that was fully or not. It felt so genuine, especially from CM Punk.
It seemed very kayfabe, 100%.
Yeah. So it was fantastic. Now you talk about Daniel Bryan's Yes movement. So it seems like every few years there is some sort of overhaul where I genuinely remember, I think it was 2018 or 2019, Mr. McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Shane McMahon, and Triple H came down to the ring and said, "We give you the control. The fans get the control from now on." And literally within 3 weeks, everything was back to exactly the way it was the week before they came down to the ring to make that speech. It just doesn't make sense. It's a recycled business. There have been so many wrestling matches. Just think of it. I can think of a maximum of twice where Goldberg wrestled Hulk Hogan, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I can only remember 2 times. So that's 2 times in, let's say, 3 years in WCW. Now in WWE right now, I can tell you for a fact, I've seen Randy Orton versus AJ Styles at least 5 times in 2021. In 1 year, I've seen 2 wrestlers who are absolutely brilliant go at it against each other. And a lot of the time, it's not a clean finish. It's not a finish where it's he's hit the RKO, they've won. He's hit the, what do you call it? The
phenomenal, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Phenomenal forearm as an example, right? And he's won the match. It's not a clean win, which is why I'm always thinking to myself, why can't WWE have a clean win? Why can't they build matches? Again, we're seeing a rehash of Roman Reigns versus Finn Balor, which just happened about a month ago. And now it's happening again at Extreme Rules this weekend.
Well, and soon enough, it's going to be Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. Like, how many times have we not seen that kind of stuff? And exactly. I've had nothing against Brock Lesnar. I think he's been fantastic. But it's the same rehash, those stars always at the top. Let me interrupt you real quick. I'm surprised. They actually got my attention recently when Big E won the championship. He cashed in Money in the Bank. If you haven't seen it yet, spoiler alert, you should have by now. I love Big E. This guy's been waiting in the wings for New Day's fantastic. I love their attitude, their energy so much. Big E is a phenomenal wrestler. He's paid his dues. He finally gets an opportunity. I don't have the faith in the organization that he's going to hold on to that chance. And I love Bobby Lashley. I love Bobby Lashley. I love what he represents. He should get another chance at the title. But I'm not convinced that once Big E has a short little run, he's going to have another one for 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, same thing with Kofi Kingston when he got the title. How did he lose it? In less than a minute, he lost the title to, I think it was Brock Lesnar. So yeah, it's very hard to keep the faith. And then especially there's a name drop of another promotion which I try and just sprinkle across every time I talk about the WWE nowadays. It's AEW. right?
Absolutely.
They are so good at all the things we've talked about just within this video. Everything we've talked about, they're doing that almost week in, week out. The general narrative, the general story, it's good. It's good majority of the time, rather than, oh, it's good because the ratings were down last week, or oh, it's good because the Undertaker is back. This is good consistently. They're building young stars. I can't believe they've got Sting, they have Bryan Danielson, they have CM Punk, they have Adam Cole, they have Matt Hardy. These are absolutely huge names. I haven't even talked about Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, John Moxley.
Right.
I've generally just talked about the big names that I used to know before I started to get back into wrestling. And it's just shocking. It's the way AEW's kind of come to the forefront. It's great. They've got their Grand Slam show tonight, or it's probably happening as we speak. Honestly, when I'm sitting alone, or when I used to sit alone, I'm like, oh, what if Goldberg fought Stone Cold Steve Austin? This is how I would want. Like, it's
Right.
those types of stories coming into real life through AEW. I did not think I would see the matchups that I'm seeing now. Darby Allin versus CM Punk. Who would have thought that 2 months ago, 3 months ago, that CM Punk was going to come back and fight Darby Allin, who is literally like Sting's son, for lack of a better term. In terms
But he is insane. I had never seen him wrestle until I saw that match, and it was CM Punk that made me watch that match, or at least the highlights on YouTube. AEW has captured the attention of the wrestling viewing audience, who there is a huge core audience that loves sports entertainment in wrestling, and I'm assuming a lot of them are fed up with WWE, or there's room for a lot. The sad thing is Impact gets pushed way to the side right here because it's still WWE. Now AEW is rising up. AEW is hungry. Kenny Omega's hungry. The owner of AEW is hungry. They want some. Chris Jericho went there for a reason, and it was a great career move.
Yeah.
AEW, they have this window right now. But what we saw with WCW, can they capitalize, or are they going to put the wrong person in charge? The great thing for us wrestling fans is when WCW, and this is the third thing I forgot to mention earlier, WCW created competition for WWE, which forced WWE to raise the stakes, forced them to bring in some more of the cruiserweights, forced them to bring in some more of the divas, they called it, and all that kind of stuff, and the product, and a little more attitude. You can't tell me DX was not spawned after the NWO. And so it made them improve their game. We're going to see the same thing, I'm convinced, because Vince McMahon is not going to lose this battle. And I'm hoping AEW outlasts and we can have these other survivors just like Impact survive this whole time. But it should be super exciting. But you're right. They have a better product right now. Will they be able to hold on to it? I'm not sure.
Oof, that is the best point to end on, because it's a positive note, but it also leaves the mystery that we need for any sort of future endeavors, especially with AEW, because again, if they can sustain this, it would be absolutely brilliant as a wrestling fan. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking wrestling. And like I said before, I'm going to keep bringing you on, talk about wrestling, just random topics from the past. And for everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please do check out Boring Reviews, Cricket for Americans, The Final Reaction, and Nick's book in the description below. It would be amazing. And last thing I just want to mention before we get going, do leave a comment and let us know what you want us to discuss next time, because I am doing weekly reviews with a friend of mine every Saturday or Sunday, but I will also be doing these bi-monthly conversations with Nick or a few other guests that I might be bringing on, and any topics to discuss. Would love to have those discussions, especially with Nick, but also with other people who join. Thank you, and until next time, everyone, take care, stay safe.